and running that thing back with pick six.
Well, you know what? I did pick out Ryan Fitzmagic. So how you feel about it?
Hey,
Hey, he around
I'm
18
not
years.
surprised how long you've been in the league and so many teams. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I picked him off, but I picked off a younger version of Ryan. This older version of Ryan actually is pretty damn good, and he can flat out play. Don't forget the guy got benched in Miami for winning too much. So that tells you a lot about him and where he's at. And he's in the top, hey, believe this or not, he's in the top 5, top 6 in QBR and completions in the last 3 years of his career. He's got better. It's like Ryan, he's getting better. But I got something that I feel, as much as I know Ryan is going to help us win and he's going to be that guy, you know, sometimes in football, it's all about the story. I feel a Kurt Warner type story happening with Tyler Heineke. I just feel if Ryan Fitzmagic missed just 1 or 2 games, he'll never get his job back again. I feel that Tyler Heineke would get in there and really become Kurt Warner of the Washington football team. Yes, the guy that comes out of nowhere that was bagging groceries that turns into a Hall of Famer. I gotta feel it.
How does that OG title make you feel to know that you had made an imprint into this fan base and things like that?
Oh, that's what make you feel. Oh,
I'm tripping. I had the mic on
you used
the
to
whole
look at
time.
the guys like B. Mitch and Doc Walker,
Funny
you Sonny Jurgensen's, and
probably heard me
you
messing
like,
with my
man, they
flow
played
speaking.
and they was a part of historic teams, and all of a sudden, we didn't
Yes,
have any history. I think we brought a different energy to the city, and
sir, shout out to CP as always. Boom, remove that. Boom, add the camera. Boom, hey, here we are. Welcome back to another episode of the Trap or Die podcast, provided to you by 214 Media. I'm your host, Marley Mo, Henny Mo, Hen Dog Mo, all that good stuff. Commander Mo, I guess, for the sake of this show tonight. But I got AJ and Dre here with me tonight, and we are joined by the good man David Harrison of SI and the Locked On Network. First and foremost, let's check in with the guests first. Dave, how you doing, man? I appreciate you checking in with us. Muted.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Dre, AJ, how y'all feeling tonight? Everything good?
Everything's great, man.
yes, sir.
Absolutely. So first off, before we even get started with the Commanders talk, man, I got to give a personal shout out to Dave, man. I want to give him a public one because I reached out to you a couple days ago. It's very small, but I stick small things stick with me in terms of like just deeds. But I reached out to you, a couple days ago, a few people that I respect in the realm that I'm talking about, that I messaged you for, and it took you probably a few minutes to get back to me, and then compared to the other people who gave me the throwaway line, like I got you, and a couple days later never got back to me. So I'm about to say I had to throw that out there, just let you know you are the one person who took his time out to give me that feedback. So appreciate you for that. And then second thing is just Tom Brady, man. Was the Tampa Bay community? I know it's a transition, but I just had to say that thank you part. But Tampa Bay and that community, were they really surprised that Tom Brady was coming back, or was it something that they were anticipating?
I'd say about half and half. I know I was on the side that basically, kind of ran with the fact that he never said the word retired or retiring, and kind of ran with that as a sign. And then all the sports interviews that he was doing and shows he was going on, just kind of showing he wasn't really ready to leave the sports world behind him. But then the other half of the fan base and some of the media members basically were kind of on the train of, get over it. It's over. It's done. Move on. So, a little bit of internal celebration when he came back, being vindicated on a hot take like that is something you always enjoy.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just go ahead and transit. I really wanted to know that because I felt like it was weird how he slow played it. And he was dropping those hints and clues over the weeks, but it was like I felt like not many were paying attention to it as much as they was like when they were trying to figure out if he was initially retiring.
Right.
All right, but for Washington, I guess we can start from the top and just get a little bit more specific as we move forward. But the Carson Wentz deal, from a macro level, I guess, and then from a micro level afterwards. But what do you think of what an acquisition like this indicates for key players in the organization, such as like Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney, et cetera, things like that. What does that type of move indicate for Carson Wentz being a Washington Commander in 2022?
I think what it's going to do is it's going to kind of help shed a light on the path and the trajectory that the team is on. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that Carson Wentz has to be successful. I think when you look at Ron Rivera's, first couple of seasons in Washington, what everybody I think will agree on is that the quarterback position has been incredibly unsettled. And while they have done things to try to make efforts to go get a quarterback, pursuing Matt Stafford last offseason, pursuing Russell Wilson this offseason, it just hasn't worked out. And you always kind of want to see a coach that gets to marry with a quarterback that fits what they're trying to do with the team. The identity is always married to the quarterback, no matter what team you have, even a defensive first team. When you go back to the Joe Flacco Baltimore Ravens, that was a very defensive-minded football team. The quarterback, Joe Flacco, still kind of sets the tone for the entirety of the team, which was that they're going to beat you, not with flashy plays, not with a whole bunch of excitement, that the wins were going to come out of a grinded-out type of a mentality. And then you had Ray Lewis on the other side to bring a little bit of the excitement. But that's kind of the dynamic there. And even with the defensive head coach in Ron Rivera, he has not had a quarterback that really embodies the kind of team that he's trying to build. And then you look at Martin Mayhew, same thing. They're trying to get this thing put together, but you have to work with what's kind of available. Now, as much as you want to give Ron and Martin and everybody in the front office a little bit of credit for those types of struggles, there's still a clock. There has to be a clock. You can't just have forever an eternity to go and try to find a guy in 5 years down the road. So, okay, now we have our guy, so now start that clock. That's just not how the NFL works. Now, I do think Ron and the staff have a little bit more leeway than most staffs would, primarily because of the environment that they're operating in with all of the other noise going on around the franchise. But I don't think it can go too much longer. You need to start putting together some winning football teams, or else the seat is going to start to get warm, as they like to say.
Hey, you mind if I jump in there real quick, Mo? So, David, man, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Question for you, though. Do you even have an idea of what Ron and company's plan is? Because it's pretty confusing at this point if you're a Washington fan.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking for as dynamic a quarterback as you can get, right? But at the end of the day, you just want that leadership presence. You need a leader in there who is going to kind of inspire some confidence in the rest of the offensive unit and go out there and not make it have to be 100% on the defense. I think we all understand that this defense is supposed to be designed to carry the team for the most part. So maybe it's a 65-35 split. But so far, we haven't had an offense in Washington that consistently can carry even that 35% of the workload. It's had to be about 85, I would say, percent on the defense, and that's not a winning formula for any NFL team. Even a defensive-minded one, you have to have some sort of contribution from the offense. I think 20 points minimum. If you can get 20 points minimum a game from an offense, or at least consistently from an offense, and you can expect to be a defense-first type of football team, grind the clock out at the end of the game, keep your opponent low on the scoreboard as well. And then when you get those 27, 28, 30-point outbursts, then you just have even more secured victories. But until you have confidence in the quarterback, until you have a quarterback that can go out and efficiently execute the scheme that's being put in place, it's hard to really have any confidence in what's going on there. And that only adds pressure to the defense.
So I guess that's why the Washington fan base is so confused, because everything that you said is true, right? But Carson Wentz doesn't embody any of those attributes. Right. And on top of that, you're paying him $28 million, and you swapped second-round picks. You also gave up thirds, and one of the thirds could be a second. Yep. If that's the case, then why not truly go with a bridge quarterback?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I don't really have an answer for that. The only thing I could potentially say here, I mean, it's funny, actually. I was watching NFL Network, and they were talking about the Carson Wentz deal, and I was like, okay, maybe someone out there smarter than me, who's been doing this longer than me, can give some sort of an explanation. There was Jesse Palmer on NFL Network, and he was asked. They said if it wasn't Jesse, it was whoever was there. They were asked, how does this Wentz trade work? And there was a hesitation there. I mean, and this is a guy who, you're on the NFL Network, right? I get paid to have some of these answers, but he gets paid a lot more money than I do to have these answers. So I think a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads. The best thing I can say with this is, bottom line, at the end of the day, the Washington Commanders had to have competition for Taylor Heineke, and the NFL draft does not look like it's going to provide that competition. So when you look at the veteran landscape, Mitchell Trubisky was a name that was thrown around, but you want to kind of avoid getting into a bidding war, because while the Washington Commanders are paying Carson Wentz $28 million this year, they're not paying him any money next year unless they absolutely want to. And when you look at the grand scheme of the development of the team, you look at these other quarterbacks that are out there. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy you're going to have to give guaranteed money to for multiple years. Same thing with Trubisky. Same thing with Jameis Winston. And at the time, with the landscape of the NFL, Jameis was almost a guaranteed bet to return to the New Orleans Saints. Now, since then, they've gotten into the Deshaun Watson business, but that's not things we can necessarily expect the Washington Commanders to be able to foresee. That's not something that was necessarily predicted or being reported on at the time. So when you look at, they did call the Raiders. I don't know if you guys are aware that they did call the Raiders a few days before making the trade for Carson Wentz to ask about Derek Carr. The assumption is that they basically got told to kick rocks by the Raiders that it wasn't happening for whatever reason, or else they probably would have held on to try to make that deal instead. So if you can't get the guy, and basically the guy started to disappear rather quickly, then you got to go get a guy. And if you would you rather spend a first-round draft pick that you're now married to for 4 years, 5 years, salary cap-wise and professionally-wise, that kind of limits you? Like, you can't draft a quarterback in the first round this year and draft one next year if he's not going to work out. But with Carson, if he doesn't work out, which most of us expect that he's not going to, and I think that's honestly, I think that's fair given the body of work. If he doesn't work out, hopefully, and this is still to be seen, hopefully if you're the Washington Commanders, you know that before week 9. And if you know if it's not going to work out before week 9, because a lot of these issues that Carson has had, you go back to the Eagles, you go back to the Colts, they manifested very quickly. These aren't things that happened in Jacksonville in week 18 or whatever, week 17 before that. Like, these are things that manifested fairly quickly. So if you're Washington and you know Carson's not the guy, then you don't let him get to 70% of snaps, which is what turns that third into a second. So basically what you're trading is a third-round pick this year, a third-round pick next year, for the chance to tap into the spirit of the last-ditch effort, because Carson Wentz is very much in a corner. It's fight or flight time for Carson Wentz. You're either going to fight for your career or you're going to run yourself out of the league, because next year there's no guaranteed money. So Washington can move on from him and pay nothing for that quarterback position to free up that entire space. You still have your first-round draft pick this year. You still have your first-round picks moving down the line. And basically you're gambling a mid-round bounty on a chance that you get the best out of what used to be a number 2 overall pick. It's a worthy gamble. It's not one that I think is very likely to produce fruit for the Washington Commanders. But again, when you look at the landscape of the quarterback situation in the NFL, I don't know that they had many better options.
Well, hold on. I did want to ask David this, since we're talking about gambles. Do you think that this is a sink or swim move for Ron?
No, I don't think so, honestly. I think that this is a scenario, and I don't know why Russell Wilson declined to waive his no trade clause for Washington. The automatic assumption that a lot of people went to, and I went there as well, is all the noise going around. He doesn't want to be associated with all the negativity going around the franchise, but he also declined to waive it for the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe it really was about staying as far west as he possibly could. And Denver's not West Coast, but they're a lot closer than Washington, D.C., right? So perhaps that's what it was. We have to take it with a grain of salt. If it had anything to do with all the noise, like if he was like, hey, I would come home, but look, you guys got a lot of drama, I'm not trying to get mixed up in all that. Honestly, if you're Team Brass, if you're Jason Wright, if you're Dan Snyder, you have to look at that and understand that your front office is working with the deck stacked against them. If players are denying the opportunity to come to your team because of what's going on around your team, it's really hard to put that against your head coach. And these communities are very tight. So if Ron Rivera gets that held against him with this coaching staff, if the front office is that held against them by Dan Snyder, by the ownership, or by Jason Wright, then that's going to spread. Like, word is going to spread, and that's going to impact their ability to find a future head coach if they do move on from Ron Rivera. So no, I don't think this move specifically is a sink or swim. Now, if this move was coupled with an extension, right, that tied them to guaranteed money that pretty much said Carson Wentz is your quarterback for the next 3 years, then yeah, I would say that. But because basically your quarterback scenario for 2023 is either going to be that you found the answer or you found an answer, right, that can be worked with, or you're probably going to be pretty high up in the NFL draft again. But because you preserved the brunt of your draft capital, you're going to have some other players, a first-round pick, a second-round pick, potentially a third. Again, I mean, things aren't done. Things can still be maneuvered and moved here. So at least, 4th, 5th, whatever day 3 draft picks that you have, you're going to have added talent on the roster to potentially bolster your unit. And if Logan Thomas can be healthy, if Curtis Samuel can be healthy, if De'Ami Brown can take a step forward in his second season, if Antonio Gibson can fix his fumble issues, and if John Bates can also continue to develop on the promise he showed, you're going to have a pretty solid unit to attract maybe Derek Carr. I mean, Derek Carr is a trade rumor every single season. Maybe next year they want to trade Derek Carr, or if not, the draft class for quarterbacks projects to be much better in 2023.
So hold on 1 second, AJ. So there's a thing that, and Alex in the chat, appreciate you checking in, Alex. He brought up some quotes, I guess, from other people around the community, Washington community. But essentially, I guess a question posed from what he's saying, because I know you mentioned it's not like this isn't the move itself that kind of ties Rivera to anything in terms of being fired or let go or make or break anything like that. But you mentioned Jason Wright a couple times, and when we talk about a rebrand and understanding the importance of being successful out of the gate, and having that ultimate, like, for context purposes, Ron Rivera has said numerous times in the media, look, this is a win now roster. We are a quarterback away. We need X, Y. We just need that missing piece. Here is why this is an enticing roster, and here is why. We have the X-rated O-line. We have the X-rated running back, X-rated wide receiver, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, like, to what degree you can really expect Ron to, like, if there's a level of failure in this season, I don't know to what degree or what threshold that has to hit for them to move on. And what I mean by that is just basically, if he gets his Carson Wentz, if he has all of these things that he put out in the media and the public and the narrative that he framed trying to recruit these guys, and fall flat on your face for the second year in a row, because last year he did it to a degree in a different way, but he did it to a degree, and he fell flat on his face, context aside. But if he does it this year, it happens again, it's going to be hard to turn around in a rebuild situation, a rebranding situation where you're looking at a whole new fan base in a sense, low ticket sales, as Alex mentioned in there, the low renewal rate. It's just hard for me to imagine a head coach being confident in himself coming back if he underperforms with an above average quarterback. Like, he's not terrible, he's above average, but he's not going to be anything more than that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think outside the unique situation that is the Washington Commanders franchise, I think the story would be completely different. You look at Matt Rule down in Carolina, they had some issues with Jerry Richardson, their former owner, and very quickly that got settled in a situation where Jerry left the NFL and was no longer part of the ownership group. David Tepper came in and immediately instilled kind of his spirit and his ethos in that organization. And now you look at Matt Rule, who was the hottest thing coming out of college football into the NFL just a few years ago, and now he's very much on the hot seat, and that's pretty much why everybody assumes they're going so hard for Deshaun Watson as a last-ditch effort to basically save his job. So I think in a lot of other scenarios and a lot of other franchises, that would be the situation. I just think because of the environment, because, I mean, you look around the NFL and you're not going to bring – well, you shouldn't. I won't say you're not. I'll say you shouldn't bring a first-time NFL head coach into a situation like what's happening with Washington. And until all of that gets figured out, that's still going to continue to be a black cloud that just kind of hangs over the franchise. Now, there are things that have happened since that have kind of added to that black cloud that honestly, some of those things don't have anything to do with Dan or Tanya Snyder. Like everything pretty much gets laid at the feet of Dan, and I don't feel bad for him in any way, shape, or form. So believe me, I'm not saying he's a victim, but there are things that have happened in more recent times that have nothing to do with Dan Snyder that have not gone well for this franchise. So believe me, there's plenty of blame to be passed around for some of the inconsistencies and deficiencies found within the Commanders organization. But again, I kind of look at the grand scheme of coaching and who out there is equipped to not only deal with the off-field drama that's happening in this organization, but also try to field a successful team while trying to keep players that have much more attractive scenarios. You look at Tim Settle and J.D. McKissick alone. Yeah. They leave the Washington Commanders, a team that has so many problems and holes going on with it. And they go to the Buffalo Bills that are now one of the darlings of the AFC all of a sudden, even though they're 30 minutes from the Canadian border, playing in open air stadium in routinely sub-zero temperatures. I mean, that's that situation, guys, is more attractive than this one right now. That's kind of tells you where the two franchises are, and a lot of that has to do with the outside noise. Now, that's the only reason, honestly. Like, that is the only reason I think Ron Rivera and this front office have as much, I don't want to say wiggle room, as much leeway as they do, just because who are you going to bring in that is better suited to deal with this situation? But even that, like I said, the clock still is going to expire. Even with all that, the clock is still going to expire eventually. So the Carson Wentz deal, again, that's where I look at. That's the best silver lining I can put on it, really, is that this is a right now problem. There was no knight in shining armor coming in 2023 for the Washington Commanders. That was pretty much settled once Russell Wilson said he's not coming to Washington. So you're not getting a knight in shining armor. What you don't want to do is let the court jester just sit on the throne unopposed. You got to put two of them, put two jesters on the field, let them go duke it out and figure out who's going to sit there and hope that he either turns into the king of the commander city. I don't know. I'm kind of free doing it freely here.
It's all new to us.
Or next year you have no salary cap committed, no large salary cap committed to a quarterback, and you've still got your draft capital intact, because while you could say this was a panic trade move, you didn't panic to the point where you sacrificed your day one value, which is the most important value in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the perception of the fans is different than the reality for free agents and also coaches out there. I know of coaches that would gladly take this job if available. I just think that Ron Rivera and company, because I have to keep saying and company because everybody's his homeboy. Marty Harney, Martin Mayhew, even though they haven't worked together in the past, but that's someone he has a rapport with. They have to be on the hot seat. We're pretty much as fans going into another year of not having the quarterback position fixed, and also creating additional holes on your team that you didn't necessarily have to. You still don't have a number 2 wide receiver. You still don't have a middle linebacker. You still don't have a free safety for real. You now took away the hybrid position of Landon Collins. You're just creating more holes for yourself. You have Chase Young coming back from a torn ACL. You haven't even signed a veteran pass rusher to back up Montez Sweat or Chase Young. It's a bunch of holes on the team. And the one thing is Daniel Snyder has really given Ron Rivera full control of every aspect of the team, because we know damn well if Daniel Snyder was running this shit, Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson would have been a quarterback for the Washington Commanders 1,000%. He would have done everything in his power to make that happen.
Hey,
right?
AJ, don't forget we're in this situation because of Dan Snyder and that Dwayne Haskins pick. Don't forget that.
Hey, we could say that, but like I said, I don't know if I said it maybe a couple shows ago, but most owners are involved in the drafting process of their number 1 picks. Like
Snyder should never be involved. Ever.
I mean, okay, yeah, he made a mistake, but at the end of the day,
he made
before
25
Snyder
years of mistakes.
but Dre, before Snyder even owned the team, Washington still hasn't had a franchise quarterback. Like, so we can't really put too much pressure on him. It's just overall as a franchise, they really haven't had a franchise quarterback. I'm not about to sit here and talk about Sonny Jurgensen back in the 50s or 60s, or I guess maybe even Joe Theismann. Like, he's probably the latest name. I mean, they had quarterbacks that took them to Super Bowls, but they were journeymen in some extent. At the end of the day, I just don't see how we can't sit here and say that Ron Rivera is on the hot seat. If, in my opinion, I'm already ready to stop rooting for this team altogether because of the moves made, especially this Carson Wentz one is baffling to me. But if Ron Rivera is the head coach of Washington Commanders next year, I am all the way off ship of everything that they have going on, because it just doesn't. Everything that's being said to the fan base, that's why he has to be careful what he says. They are taking literal. So when you say that we want to retain J.D. McKissick, and then it comes out that you never even offer him anything.
I was about to say that's I guess that's the important part, AJ. Like, like you said, the literal part. And Dave, I get your opinion on that. I do want to quickly talk about free agency too before we get you out of here. But yeah, like what AJ just said, Ron again, we talked about it. He's put his name out there in the public. He said a ton of things in the public, and essentially later down the line, he has to kind of correct himself or backtrack. And they're like, well, this ain't what you said X amount of months ago or X amount of weeks ago. This is completely different than what you said. Why is your tone such softer than what it was, or your message such softer than what it was a while ago? To AJ's point, yeah, I think I would like to get your opinion on that. I think it's important in a sense of I just leave it like this. His messaging is critical, because he's already put forth some things right now, and they didn't even put an offer out for JD McKissick. And I guess it may have come down to JD or Bobby McCain. I don't know, but I'll get your opinion on that.
Yeah. So real quick, something that AJ said that I think is very important too. Like, I didn't say Washington couldn't find a head coach after Ron Rivera. There's only 32 jobs. You're going to find a head coach. Somebody's going to take the opportunity because they're going to want it. My point basically is that there's not a lot of head coaches that are going to be available that are equipped and seasoned enough to kind of handle the noise that's going on around the organization while trying to be the head coach of an NFL team. I think everybody needs to kind of understand and appreciate a little bit of what being a head coach for the Washington Commanders means compared to being the head coach of a lot of other NFL franchises. There's a lot more than just X's and O's that goes into that job. And Ron has not always been perfect, but I think he's done a pretty good job with what he's been handed is kind of the point there. And I look at like Byron Leftwich or Todd Bowles. Like a Todd Bowles is very kind of quiet and subdued in public, and him getting the rash of questions about everything going on around this franchise is not going to give the answers that is going to satisfy the fan base or the media in this area enough to really warrant anything. And then you look at Byron Leftwich. I mean, you're trying to get your feet under you as an NFL head coach for the first time. I don't think you want to have all this other stuff going on around you. Now, granted, somebody would take the job. Absolutely, AJ. But is that somebody really going to be able to function better in this environment than Ron Rivera? I don't know. And that's something that we may have to find out here in a couple of years. But as far as what's being said and what's being done, look, I can only provide what I think may be the reasoning behind what they're doing. I'm not saying I agree with everything that's being done. I wouldn't have traded for Carson Wentz if that makes anybody any happier. I think we're all basically on the same page. I know Rooster is definitely on the same page that neither of us would have traded for Carson Wentz. But honestly, Carson on the field looks like an upgrade over Taylor Heineke. You know what I mean? The question is most of the questions about Carson Wentz are surrounded about his mental toughness, his mental acuity, and his leadership, which as a quarterback are almost just as important at times as arm strength and accuracy. So for me, that's where the confusion comes in. But somewhere in that building, they believe that they can tap into a part of Carson Wentz that nobody else has been able to. I don't know that I believe it either, but I would say this, that Jameis Winston is a name that I was kind of championing before all this stuff went down. Look, I don't know what's going to happen with the New Orleans Saints, but I do know that if you're Jameis Winston right now watching your team go after Deshaun Watson, even though he is Deshaun Watson, it can't really make you feel very good inside about their confidence level in you moving forward. So if he becomes available and if he is forced to kind of go into a one-year contract market to where he's going to take a little bit of money to go get a shot somewhere, I don't know, maybe Washington rolls the dice on him. Maybe they bring him in for a mid-level contract, less than Mitchell Trubisky, but more than, what Jameis got his first year in New Orleans, and they bring in a little bit more competition. I would be okay with that. And honestly, even if it leads to a $28 million quarterback and Carson Wentz sitting on the bench, I'd rather have the better guy, even if he's lesser paid, playing on the field for the franchise than having the guy that costs more money on there just because we're spending more money on him. As far as wanting to bring back guys and not making offers to them, yeah, that's kind of what I was hinting at, right? Like, we can lay a lot of this stuff at Dan Snyder's feet, but there are things, the Sean Taylor situation, that you can't throw that on Dan Snyder. You can't throw the name change process and the reveal and all those things. You can't throw the contract negotiations at Dan Snyder's feet. You can't throw the trade compensation at Dan Snyder's feet. And again, Russell Wilson refused to waive his no trade clause to come to Washington. I don't think Dan Snyder could have necessarily, changed that. I don't think Russell Wilson looked at the offer that Washington made and said that's not enough for Seattle to get. That's why he didn't waive his no trade clause. It was either because he doesn't want to deal with the noise going on around the franchise, or he just didn't want to move back to the East Coast. I really believe it's one of those two things. Dan's not going to change any of those circumstances.
But who created those circumstances?
Dan created those. No, absolutely. Dan Snyder is a problem for this organization. I think that's well established. My point, and I think AJ's point too, is not all of this stuff can be put on Dan. Some of this stuff has to be laid at the feet at other people. And I 100% agree with you. I just don't think that all of that kindling being put at the feet of these people are going to be lit up into a fire as quickly as it would for most NFL franchises.
All right. You mentioned Jameson Winston, and obviously he's a free agent. And I guess we'll close out with the free agent talk. Given the money situation, the league average cap space is around $13.7 million, and Washington currently sits at $5.7 million. Knowing what we know now, Carson Wentz deal, the context of all those things, and the holes that they do have. Two things. How significant of an ordeal is that for Washington this year? The money thing and the holes that they have to fill. And then secondly, the positions that you would prioritize in free agency now or the draft. How would you do that given the money situation and the Wentz trade that has come about? Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the salary cap. Honestly, there's a couple of simple reconstructions that they can do for contracts if they need to free up money rather quickly. I know Jonathan Allen is one of them. If they do a simple reconfiguring of his contract, it doesn't take any money away from him. You're just moving how he gets paid and where that money gets accounted for on the NFL books. You can free up something like $18 million off his contract with the snap of a finger. So I'm not worried about the salary cap. What I am worried about is drafting. And that's, again, getting back to, I think, what AJ and I are both trying to say. Some of this stuff can't be laid at the feet of Dan Snyder. Jamin Davis is not a Dan Snyder move. Benjamin St. Juste, I think he showed some promise and potential when he was on the field. Unfortunately, injured too much. I'm not really going to blame anybody for a guy getting injured more than you expect him to. That's not something you can scout, but it's still, at the end of the day, is a draft pick that, as right now, has not come to fruition. And 3 concussions in 1 year is terrible. And it could become a bigger problem in year 2, depending on how his body heals. The Curtis Samuel situation is obviously a problem. De'Ami Brown not quite being able to execute within his role as much as everybody wanted him to is a problem. If Washington Commanders go out and have another draft that really does not produce an impact player for this team, that's a problem. And to me, in some ways, that's almost a bigger problem than not being able to trade for Matt Stafford, not being able to trade for Russell Wilson, because those things to a certain extent are a little bit out of your hands, right? It takes 2 people to make a trade, all those things. So those 2 things are a little bit out of your control, but you choose who you draft. And you don't choose who comes off the board before you, but you choose what happens when you come on the clock. And, look, Jamin Davis wasn't my first pick. Jamin Davis honestly wasn't even a guy that we looked at ahead of the draft because we didn't really see the fit. They drafted him. We just like I'm doing Carson Wentz, our job is to give our honest opinion and then also say, okay, but what could they be seeing to explain why they did what they did? We did our best to do it. It didn't work out. It didn't fit. I don't know what they're going to do with him moving forward. But in my opinion, off-ball linebacker is still probably the biggest hole, not the only hole. You guys have described a lot of those holes very, very well. And I think that they all are very valid. But I think off-ball linebacker is your biggest hole. So Nakobe Dean out of Georgia is obviously a big name to watch, as well as Chad Muma, who had a really good week at the Senior Bowl. I like Brian Nassimo out of Oklahoma. He's like a late day 2, early day 3 prospect, but I really like him. And honestly, the lateral movement I saw out of Brian, the instincts I saw out of him, and some of the other coachable factors I saw out of him, given the opportunity to perform and given some solid coaching from Jack Del Rio to his staff, I think Brian Nassimo might actually be a better year 1 player than Jamin Davis.
Oh, but Jamal, before we go, I wanted to ask you, because I was under the impression that middle linebacker was more of a bigger hole than off-ball linebacker, which I think they moved Jamin Davis in the late season to off-ball linebacker. So you think off-ball linebacker at this point is a bigger hole than middle linebacker?
Well, so when I talk about off-ball linebackers, I basically just mean guys that aren't playing on the line of scrimmage. So in a 4-3 defense, that's basically all 3 of your linebackers could be very well considered off-ball linebackers. Now, strong side linebacker, weak side linebacker, they play closer to the line of scrimmage. Obviously, on certain packages, you're going to step up to the line of scrimmage. But really what I mean is you need linebackers that can cover. You've got pass rushers. Again, in theory, we'll see what happens as Chase Young and Montez Sweat get back to the team. You want to use some of those edge linebackers to be your supplemental pass rushers. But we're talking about edge defenders. You're typically talking about a traditional 3-4 outside linebacker whose primary role is pass rushing, or a 4-3 defensive end with their hand in the dirt. So when I say off-ball linebacker in a 4-3, I'm essentially talking about the entire unit. I love Cole Holcomb, but outside of him, I don't really see anything. So you need to add some flair and some flavor in there. And yeah, Jamin Davis as a weak side linebacker, I think is a better fit than what they maybe tried to do with him overall. But I still think you need to add. Honestly, if I'm the Washington Commanders, I'm probably going to add a linebacker to that group every day if the talent is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll jump in real quick too. I think, the issue big time is drafting. With Jamin Davis, for example, he was taken 19th overall to be a middle linebacker. I don't think in this particular draft, no way in hell that at 11 you should be looking for a off-ball linebacker as far as like weak side backer. You more so should be trying to fix that middle linebacker spot. But once again, Ron in the media said that they were looking for a veteran middle linebacker, and there's only really one out there that could really, provide some type of spark to your team on the open market right now. That's Bobby Wagner, but everybody else is gone. Jordan Hicks, the guy from Atlanta that some people were interested in, or I guess maybe you could use Miles Jack at the middle linebacker position, but I mean, I'll also chime in on the Ben St. Juste situation since I'm like really hands-on with that. So Ben in particular, he's going to be good. He's never suffered a concussion before in his career until coming here and playing. And what happened is he suffered his first concussion and he cleared himself and they cleared him too early. So he still had the side effects from that concussion when he ended up getting the second one, but he's good. He's in better spirits. He's ready to go. He's been training like crazy at Mamba Sports Academy in Calabasas and now in Atlanta, working out with AJ Terrell, AJ Boye, and a whole bunch of other guys in the league. So I think he'll be good. I just wanted to put that out there as I personally know the situation. But yeah, I mean, they just got to do a better job drafting. I think that's what their focus is. They rather not spend in the free agency. They rather draft. But if you're going to draft guys, you need to hit on these picks and you need to coach them up, because you can't take a guy, Jamin Davis, who was projected to go 3rd or 4th round at 19th overall, and then you're not giving him the snaps, and we're really not even seeing any improvement, because you should have known this information in all of your scouting that he couldn't take on blocks to be a middle linebacker in the NFL. Instead, you didn't. And now the fan base is even more confused because we're like, why aren't we seeing this guy play? And John Bostic is also out for the year. Cole Holcomb is not really a middle linebacker. Who's really calling the plays? They really don't. Right now, they don't even have a defensive play caller.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. They really don't have a quarterback for that defense. They have a leader in Jonathan Allen and an emotional guy in Chase Young. But you're right. They absolutely don't have a quarterback for the team. Look, I like Nakobe Dean. I know he's a little bit undersized and there are some knocks on his game. I really like Nakobe Dean at 11. I wouldn't be upset about it. I know the traditional thought process drafting a middle linebacker that high in the NFL draft. Remember, I believe me, I went through it when the Buccaneers drafted Devin White, and honestly, it hasn't stopped even since they drafted Devin White about drafting an off-ball linebacker, a middle linebacker specifically, that early in the NFL draft. So I totally get the traditional train of thought. I think it's that important of a position, especially with this defense. I think if you get that position right, then it could unlock a lot of other things on the defense. I love what you said about Benjamin St. Juste, because coming out of the 2020 Senior Bowl, as soon as I walked into the stadium there in Mobile, he was one of the first guys that just jumped off the field at me, and I couldn't take my eyes off him all week. So when he landed with Washington in that NFL draft, I was super excited, very excited to see what's happening. And like I said, I think you saw flashes. I think you saw some of that talent that brought Benjamin St. Juste to Washington in the first place, and then those injuries happen, and that's always unfortunate. So again, you definitely don't blame the player, and you don't want to blame the coach staff too much on that, because again, you can't scout concussions. And like you said, if you had no concussions in his history before that, you definitely can't scout that some kind of thing. So hoping that he can definitely come back, because I really think he is the crown jewel of that draft class. You just need to get him and help him stay there.
Absolutely. Dave, man, I always appreciate your objectivity, man.
Yeah.
It's always welcome, because I know you come in from a different side of things, especially with your the Locked On Tampa side. So you have multiple viewpoints of a situation, especially with Washington, where people need it. So let the people know, it's Plug Talk. Let the people know for where they can find you, read from you, and hear from you, big dog.
Yeah, Locked On Washington Commanders 5 days a week. I'm not there 5 days a week, but Chris or I are there 5 days a week. Pretty much all year. June is pretty much the only time you won't get 5, and even then you'll still get 3 days a week of Locked On Washington Commanders. Now we're on YouTube, so if you want to check that out, by all means, go ahead and do that. And on Twitter at dharrison82, always open to talk football. Really doesn't matter what team. I'm a fan of the game, and I love everything that's going on around the league right now. So I'm open to talk pretty much anything going on with football. And then Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, the Washington site. I think it's si.com//Washington is where you can find my writing. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely,
Appreciate
Dave.
you
I
too,
will
Dave.
talk to you. Obviously, looking forward to the next time we have you on.
Yes, sir. Have a good one, guys.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
take it.
All right, there go the big dog, Dave Harrison. Let me go ahead and add my boy.
Hold on, hey Jamal.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna say before we get started, can me and AJ kind of continue this conversation we was having on Twitter? me and AJ was having a conversation on Twitter, man.
Just bring in the context so me and Montel can jump in whenever we're ready.
No,
just let
yeah.
the people know what we talking about and y'all got it.
So here's the deal. Me and AJ was talking about. I had put out a tweet saying that the Colts removed, to get rid of Carson Wentz, kind of reeked of Jim Irsay, and the reason being is Colts look desperate right now. And AJ is saying this is a bigger indictment on Wentz, and I'm like, well, if the owner wants you gone, the owner can do whatever the hell he wants to get you gone. But no one wants to be in a quarterback hell or desperation situation, which is what the Colts are in right now. They went out and they tried to get Deshaun Watson, and they knew damn well Houston wasn't going to answer the phone. That's your division opponent. They're not going to trade Deshaun Watson in the division. So AJ was asking, are the Colts better off? And AJ actually proposed something that I thought was preposterous. He said that, hey, look, I had to use the big word on AJ because he said the Colts can go out and draft Sam Howell and be in just as good of a position right now with Carson Wentz, or better with Sam Howell if they draft Sam Howell in the second round. That I want to know. I want to expound on that.
So the reason why I said that, right, is because one, the Colts gave up a lot to go get this quarterback, right? And the main reason why they did so is because of the relationship between Wentz and Frank Reich in Philadelphia. That was really the only team that really was inclined to, take that contract, that player off of Philadelphia Eagles' hand and say, let's work with him. The Colts have also been in a quarterback carousel as well, just like us. Like what I think I read, this is their 5th quarterback in 5 years. So they pretty much changed every year from Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers to whoever else, right? So if they were so inclined to move on, knowing that they have to get this right, or they have to do something in order to keep their jobs, like Frank Reich and Chris Ballard, they have to keep their jobs because last year was horrible the way that it ended. With Irsay, he owns the team. He's cool, but at the same token, if they were so willing to get rid of Wentz instead of giving it another go round where they missed the playoffs by 1 game, right? They could have won down that stretch against the Raiders or the Jags, but they missed the playoffs in 1 game, and they were willing to say, you know what? We'll throw our hands up. We lost the 1st round pick. We lost the 3rd, but we'll go ahead and move this guy to another team. And we really don't even have the answer of who's going to replace Wentz, but we'll figure it out. And the reason why I say it's more an indictment on Wentz is because it just shows the lack of leadership that he really had within that locker room, and also the fact that he couldn't sell himself well enough to the coaching staff and the owners that he could improve on his first year with the Colts. And the reason why I say all of that is you can go and get in the second round. The reason why I think they really swapped picks with us to move from, I want to say from 47th to 41st, was because they know that a quarterback will be sitting there in the second round. So, for example, if it is Sam Howell, are you telling me he can't do the same thing that Carson Wentz just did, or possibly even better?
He has to win 10 or more games, AJ. He has to win 10 or more games.
But that's just one more. That's one more game than what they really aren't relying on. They really aren't relying on the quarterback to run the team and be the vocal point, to be the star of the team. everything is predicated on the run. So if everything is predicated on the run, and then it's your defense, you now brought in a new defensive coordinator because your defensive coordinator got hired as the Bears head coach. You now have a more aggressive D coordinator in Gus Bradley. And on top of that, you're probably going to add more pieces in the draft or whatever the case is at wide receiver. You're really just asking your quarterback to hand off the ball and play off of play action. Like, it's a different situation. Whereas here, Carson Wentz has to be the offense. In Indianapolis, he did not need to be the offense. He just needed to do simple things to get the job done, not turn the ball over, not fuck it up, and he still couldn't get that done.
But I think certain offenses work better for certain quarterbacks, and I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say Washington is the offense for Carson Wentz in terms of, like, does this one work for him? But I do know he ran two very similar schemes with Philly and Indy, except for Indy was actually less predicated on, like you mentioned it. I'm not going to repeat it. But I think that's kind of the difference, is that he had a little bit more control with the offense in Philly, I don't even know. I don't want to say nothing like that, but I feel like Indy, because of their run percentage, running it over 55% of the time, I believe, is not that for a quarterback like Carson Wentz. I don't know if you can really bottle him in and say, we don't want you to run the offense from a passing standpoint. We just need you to hand the ball off. I think it's different because they have a running back in Jonathan Taylor who all he has to do is hand it off to him, throw him a swing pass, throw him a screen pass, and you just do your thing. But when you have a quarterback who has more control over an offense and has the ability to make plays for an offense versus, like, I just need not to fuck it up, two different mentalities. And that's where, like, I'm just painting a distinction. I'm not picking a side, but based on the conversation that you, Dre, and you, AJ, had, I feel like it's a distinction between the two. It's not necessarily don't fuck it up. When you come here to Washington, it's I can't wait to make plays in this offense and show people what I got. Indy could have been the different thing, and he doesn't want to fuck anything up. It doesn't, just because people say Frank Reich is his old offensive coordinator, I don't know how much weight that holds, because he's not playing in the same scheme that he had in Philly. It's different players on their roster. Their offensive line is very strong in the run game. They have no receivers. They had one person in Michael Pittman, T.Y., for the 1 year that Carson Wentz was there. T.Y. was hurt. You had Mo Alley Cox as your tight end, who was okay. I just don't know if the offense benefited him. And then when you come to Washington, you have a little bit more speed on the outside. You have a little bit more threats. I don't know. I can't, like, on paper, right? Deami Curtis, we know that on paper. And that's kind of where I like things are different here in Washington, where he can be more of a playmaker versus being more of a reserved quarterback. It's two different mentalities, two different approaches. And I think that's kind of the opportunity that Ron Rivera is providing Carson Wentz. And I think that's the part of the logic behind this thing. And I know the conversation with you all, Dre and AJ, was more so about the ownership in Indianapolis versus being an indictment on Wentz. But I think that's kind of how things marry in my mind. I just think it's two different approaches.
Yeah, I mean, I think it matters that Frank Reich is the head coach, because that's the person that knows him. He knows what he can do and what he can't do. And just off the top of my head, not looking at no statistics or whatever, but I'm pretty sure any game that they had to throw the ball more than 30 times, they lost. And that's because the ball was in his hand more to control the narrative of what was going to happen with that offense. Like, that team is really, it's a run-centric team. Like, so now,
and they have a run blocking team as well.
Yeah, they're built. Yeah. They're built for the play action. So it's kind of like San Francisco. They're built to run the ball and for Jimmy G to play off of the play action. That's why the connection of Jimmy G to the Colts, it makes so much sense, and that's why people keep thinking that that's what's going to happen. But it's
Carson
like,
isn't a game manager, AJ. I don't think he's a game manager. I think you're trying to say he's a game manager.
That's where I was
Jimmy
pointing
G.
to. Like, that's just not. He's more so. He has a different mindset when he steps on the field. That's why I was like, it's two different distinctions. Like, he went into a situation where they wasn't asking him to do much, and that's just not Carson Wentz. He can't be bottled in. You have to give him those opportunities to make plays. And like give him the green light. not necessarily opportunity. You always have opportunities. You're the quarterback. You make the throws. But I'm saying give him the green light within the offense. And I think that's where I was like, there's probably a different distinction here between Indianapolis, what was asked, and then obviously what will be asked in Washington.
Well, I just want to chime in before we move on.
Yeah,
just
there we go. I'm about to say, what's up with this nigga? He ain't saying nothing.
Well, I wanted to let y'all get y'all points off the table, but I wanted to make two quick points. One, Dre already mentioned. If the owner wants to get rid of you, there's nothing that you can do. We don't know 100% what was going on. That leadership thing, that's the narrative nationally. But players have already come out and spoken on Winston's behalf and indicated like that wasn't the case. You know, granted, teammates are supposed to do that, but teammates don't step out of their way. You know what I mean? And say, that's my guy. If you really weren't, you know what I'm saying? What everybody's painting Carson Wentz to be. These owners control the narrative of what goes around in the media, whether we like that or not. They are the big dogs. They control the narrative of the national media. My second point to that is Wentz. Of course, you guys mentioned this as well. Is Wentz is he's a rhythm passer, just like there's rhythm runners in the NFL. The more carries they get, the better off they are as the game goes on. Wentz, you can't bottle him in. You can't put the training wheels on him, bro. It just don't work that way. He's not that. He is a playmaker. So we'll see how it goes as the season, comes to fruition. But we'll just see how things go.
So a couple things because it's free agency, man. We got a few more things to talk about. Wentz is here. Deshaun Watson ain't coming here, and we have to transition to the free agency side of things. But one more Carson Wentz centered topic. It comes across from your tweet, Dre. I felt like it was a pretty good conversation I saw on Twitter, and I want to give you that floor to bring it out here on the podcast. And everybody in the chat, let me know what you think. So Dre had mentioned, the more I think of it, Carson Wentz is the best case scenario for the franchise after not being in it for the bigger names. Whether you love or hate Rivera and Turner, who just signed an extension, by the way, you're going to be validated one way or the other this upcoming season. They're gambling on Wentz, who has success in the league. If it fails, that's a huge indictment on the staff. If it works, that's a great sign. The season will answer that. Although I know a lot of you are sure it's imminent failure. Dre, your tweets, what was your thought process when you were putting that out there? What was you thinking about specifically?
Well, basically, I just saw the reaction to the whole Carson Wentz trade. And I seen everyone pretty much has already made it up in their mind that this is a failure of a trade, which it can be. I mean, and I'm not knocking the people who feel this way because given the organization's history with any kind of trade or quarterbacks in general, everything usually fails. But the thing is, from what I see in Ron Rivera and company, one thing I took from this whole situation is they don't believe in the draft. Man, in my opinion, you don't draft a quarterback at 11 now at all. I mean, you just don't, because if you loved any of those quarterbacks in this draft, you don't go out and trade a couple of draft picks for Carson Wentz, which is a starting quarterback, because that means if you still want to draft a quarterback at 11, you're drafting a backup player, which you can't do because I mean, Jamin Davis was a failure of a draft pick last year. I mean, he can be an NFL player, he can turn into an NFL linebacker, but last year he wasn't it. And this team needs players that can contribute right now. And I look at the quarterback position and, the staff, Ron, Marty, and Martin, they're looking for players that can contribute right now. And they go out and they trade for Carson Wentz, who is an established starting quarterback in this league. So if you go out and still trying to draft a guy at 11, then that just says to me that you don't really have a plan, So Carson Wentz right now, he is the plan. He's the plan at quarterback for Washington. So now, I mean, I think they're gambling on traits. And if you're gambling means there's a high stake and there's a high loss, probability. So if Carson Wentz wins, if he's the guy you think you traded for, he's not a bridge option. He's a guy that you're going to have here for a couple of years. But if Carson Wentz is what people have kind of said, okay, this is the guy who has been with, two different teams have got rid of him in 2 straight years. If he's that guy, then Ron and them made the wrong move. And we're going into year 4 now with the Ron Rivera era, and he still doesn't have an answer at quarterback. So that says to me that you're going to be validated in whatever you think about Ron upcoming this year. Not only Ron, but Scott Turner, like you said, Jamal, he just got an extension. So, and the knock on Scott Turner, or the narrative around Scott Turner is, even if you don't like Scott Turner, a lot of people don't like Scott Turner. AJ's one of them, but a lot of people don't like Scott Turner. And but the thing is, with Scott Turner,
why they get that man an extension for what? Like,
but see, AJ,
how you get an extension
what do you expect?
Mediocre?
But AJ, what do you expect? You think Ron's going to fire Scott Turner? He's here as long as Ron Rivera's here. Now, if Ron Rivera got fired next year, whoever the next coach would be, they're not going to hire Scott Turner. They're not going to bring Scott Turner on staff with them. So the thing is, Ron Rivera trusts Scott Turner at this point. I mean, I don't think he has any reason to believe he doesn't trust Scott Turner. And you can also use the excuse, whether you want to like it or not, that he hasn't had the weapons or the quarterback to kind of, do the offense that he wants to have. So you look at that in that situation. So that's why I said what I said in that tweet about Carson Wentz, is that Carson Wentz is a guy. He's a guy that obviously this franchise has gambled on. Not just Ron, but Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney. All of those guys have kind of co-signed on this prop. You have to assume that they all did. And this is a guy that they're gambling on. So they have to be right. In terms of them having to be right, this is a guy that has the arm strength that none of the quarterbacks that Washington has had in the last couple of years has. He has that arm strength. So now you have to get production out of this guy. Scott Turner has to get production out of this guy. Scott Turner doesn't have the excuse of, I have a noodle arm quarterback, or I have a one-legged quarterback anymore. He doesn't have those excuses anymore with Carson Wentz. Whether Carson Wentz is whoever anyone says Carson Wentz has been for the last couple of years, he has to work here for everybody to kind of be validated in what they're doing. And that's Scott Turner, Ron Rivera, and all of those guys.
What it sounds like you're saying is Scott Turner is unproven. And if that is the case, so if that's the case, why the extension? Because you could have used this year as a prove it year. Show me what you can do now that you don't have the noodle arm guy. Now that you don't have one-legged QB, what was the point of the extension? I mean, I understand that that's your guy, but that's also an indictment on Ron. You got to be able to look at the landscape again. And I think we've had this conversation before. And I don't know if you were in agreement or not, and we'll see this year, but tops, Scott Turner is probably middle of the pack as an offensive coordinator. Is that what we're aiming for, or what are we doing here?
Well, Montel, to answer your question, when I'm saying Scott Turner, so I lumped them all together as one, Scott and Ron. Now, if this Carson Wentz thing doesn't work this year, what are we doing year 4? Why are we bringing Ron back year 4? And if you're not bringing Ron back year 4, you're not bringing Scott Turner back year 4. You still need a quarterback. You still need a quarterback in year 4. It's not just about Scott. Yeah, Scott's not. Look. If this doesn't work, we're not firing Scott and saying, "Oh, this shit didn't work." We're firing Ron as well. I mean, that's where you're going.
That's what he's saying, and what I'm saying is, why do you need to extend him if he already is on his last year of his deal? If it works out, it works out. Maybe Ron don't think in the back of his mind he's going to get fired, but he has to have some type of inclination. And if you now have the quarterback, ride it out. You feel me? It's kind of like the same thing with Terry McLaurin. They're saying, we're bringing in this guy with this big arm. Why would I go and sign a deal now? The market is already changing. On top of that, if this guy is going to be who they project him to be and throw the ball downfield and give me more opportunities at these bigger plays, I'm going to bank on the fact that this should actually work, and I'm going to put up even greater numbers. I'm confused at the fact that he got extended. I thought that there would be some changes on this coaching staff going into this year. There has literally been none. It's the same. Everything is coming back. So it's like,
but AJ, who did you think will get fired or be gone by this year, in your opinion?
I felt like something should have happened just to just to put somebody on edge and let them know, like, hey, you guys are coaching for your jobs right now. Like, I thought at least Jack Del Rio might get changed. I thought maybe they might promote Chris Harris, the secondaries coach who's been getting looks at DC with a couple teams, even with Wisconsin, things of that nature. I thought that they might make a move there, but they literally didn't change anything on the staff that I'm aware of. I know they brought in Luis Castillo, who's famously known as being an offensive line guru, to now work with the tight ends. But when you do moves like this, you also take on Carson Wentz $28 million. You now strap yourself in being able to spend in the free agency. You're now banking on hitting on these draft picks. You're not making any moves. Like, what, this team looks no different than last year so far.
And I feel as though Ron is limited as an evaluator, not just an evaluator of talent, of players, but coaches as well. Everything he does is bring people in from Carolina. This is my guy. This is my guy. If that's who your head coach is, and he's that limited and he's that narrow-minded, then that's an indictment on him. I'm sorry. Again, Turner hasn't proven anything. If we go out here, and I believe in Wentz as a head coach, and let's say we go 8-9 and our defense look good, and you know what I'm saying, Wentz looked decent, but my play caller wasn't up to par, you've already extended this guy. So you mean to tell me if things don't go well this year and Ron does keep his job, he keeps talking about this 5-year plan. I actually think he's going to get 5 years. I think if this year is bad, he's still here. You mean to tell me you're willing to go into that with Scott Turner again? I don't know, man. It's everybody else. We sign players to prove the deals, but we don't do that with the coaching. Not when it's wrong.
Well, Monte, the good thing about coaches is it doesn't count against the salary cap. That's just money that Dan Snyder will have to eat. It's just money that Dan Snyder will have to eat. You know?
Yeah, but then you back at square one again, where you don't have a quarterback that's intrigued to play with this offensive coordinator, and you have to lose games in order to be able to get those top prospects like a CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. So it's all puzzling. And that's why I hate the fact that Ron Rivera has been talking so much in the media, because that's all fans can go based off of. They're hearing what he's saying. If he just keeps it behind closed doors, nobody really knows his thinking. Nobody knows his process. Nobody understands what the real game plan is. But when you come out and tell motherfuckers who now have to go from the idea of being the Washington Redskins to the Washington football team to Commanders, that we're going to do everything in our power to get an elite quarterback in here, and we are close to being able to compete. We're also going to get a veteran middle linebacker. Oh, we also want to keep J.D. McKissick. And you do none of these things? Get the fuck out of here, bro. Like, nobody got time to listen to you. You rapping at this point. Like, you capping.
Yeah, that's a major problem. Like, we talk about it all the time throughout the season, just in terms of the communicating and messaging. That's one issue. Amani, my bad, Amani. Look, I got my notifications muted on my one monitor, so I appreciate the
Amani, that's my boy.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the resubscription, man, on Twitch. Everybody, if you are watching on Twitch, make sure you are following. That is a followers only chat. And subscribe, you know what I'm saying, if you support the Trap or Die podcast and the fellas. All right, so there was one thing. So in terms of free agency and like a draft outlook, I'll bring this topic up. One thing that, since we're sticking on the thing of messaging, right? One thing that dawned in my head, and I want to get your all opinion on this, is when Ron Rivera says, and I know I'm not giving the words verbatim, I don't care to, but you kind of understood what he was saying. He was basically saying, like, this is a win now roster. We just need a quarterback. And when you take that into perspective, and Monty is right, they can spend in free agency if they restructure some contracts. That's fine. I feel like they need to put some pep in their step, because you missing out. They need to put some pep in their step, restructure them contracts, and get some money freed up. But when they say that they're ready to win now, what's to say that they're really tripping off of losing people like J.D. McKissick that Amani mentioned? What's to say that they're really looking to spend big in free agency to begin with if this roster is win now? Now, I know, and we know that they need to spend in free agency, but I'm trying to dig into the mind of Rivera and them over there. If they're so hard focused or hard pressed on saying that this roster is ready to go. So I think that their major focus is like the second or third week of free agency, like official free agency, and then trying to hit on those first 2 draft picks. Like I don't really think that they care about free agency this year because they're worried about building and developing in the draft, and they'll turn around and focus on free agency next year. It also turns into a Terry McLaurin conversation. Just all of those things being considered, I don't think that they're focused on Terry McLaurin this year. I think they kind of know where Terry McLaurin is headed, and I think that's the franchise tag, unfortunately, for this team. But I think Terry knows, and I just feel like these guys aren't focused on anything right now. They'll stick with the draft, and they'll focus on everything else after this year, so long as they have their quarterback for 2022.
I mean, no, Jamal, I do agree. I mean, and for Terry's sake, it's in his best interest to play on a franchise tag because Terry has no clue what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. I mean, Terry has been in like a quarterback situation in flux ever since he's been here. Like, nothing has been like a sure thing with him from that position. So maybe if, him and Carson has some kind of rapport and they have the chemistry and Terry goes out and have, his breakout career year here with Carson, then he'll probably entertain the thought of a long-term extension here. But for right now, I think it's in Terry's best interest. I mean, not even as a Commanders or Washington football fan or whatever, I think I would recommend Terry go, play on a franchise tag for a year until he knows what exactly he's getting out of the quarterback situation here, because he hasn't had anything stable since he's been here. But other than that, I mean, you have to just, as the Washington football team, you have to show something. Like, I mean, quarterback. Like, that's why you went out and got Carson Wentz. Like I said, this is what I've been talking about. This is the gamble you've taken with Carson Wentz. Like, you've taken this gamble to say, like, I know AJ mentioned this earlier, and a lot of people that have kind of been talking about this, has Carson Wentz been a bridge option? But I think Ron Rivera and his staff is looking at Carson Wentz as more than a bridge. I think they're gambling that he's more than a bridge. Yeah, I think they're gambling that he's more than a bridge option.
And if they are, that is the fucked up issue with this whole situation. Like,
it's a gamble.
I disagree, though, and here's why I say that. This is a league where it's similar to life. You got to go all in, and if they're going all in on Carson Wentz and they're banking on that, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Here's why: because you have to be able to build, you have to be able to solidify that position. And it's not like Wentz has shown, like, and this is the thing I've been like since this trade, people are talking about Wentz as if he's some slumlord. Like, dude is a bona fide starter, bro. And we haven't had that. Beggars can't be choosers, bro. Like, he's a top 20 quarterback. You have to be able to go out here and build a roster. And honestly, I like their approach. I'm not big on free agency, getting like William Jackson. He signed that big money deal. I don't care how talented William Jackson is. And I know his story isn't over. He's not going to outperform that contract. I don't want any big money free agents. I want you to build through the draft. I want them to continue. And they've done this, and they don't get a lot of credit for it. They hit on those second-tier free agents. You got to be able to do stuff like that. And you don't need a Aaron Rodgers in order to, if you have a roster that's built correctly. And I do think that their roster building has been better than people give them credit for. I do believe that they are in win now mode. And I know a lot of fans are going to disagree. And yes, they have holes, but every single team has holes. And if Carson Wentz can give us an inkling of what he had in Philly before that final year, we talking about a team that's easily in the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, you there. You got a chance. So I know a lot of people want to disagree with that, dog, but I'm telling y'all, look, we're gonna see.
Hey man, if we're gonna sit here and like think about the Carson Wentz from 5 years ago, we might as well bring up Colin Kaepernick then. Like, I mean,
but last year, how many QBs outperformed him last year? Let's just talk about last year. Do you think Tannehill and Garoppolo outperformed Wentz?
Let's talk about those stats, AJ.
I mean, I can't.
About that.
I don't want to talk about the stats because I seen that motherfucker play up close and personal. I seen him play up close and personal, and that shit was not pretty.
How many games?
I don't know what Tannehill. I don't know what Tannehill's stats are. I will give credit. Carson Wentz is talented. There's a reason why he was drafted number 2 overall coming out of such a small time school in North Dakota State, right? He opened the door for Trey Lance to get drafted, opened the door for Josh Allen to go in the first round. He has an arm, but as far as the other intangibles, he just doesn't have it. So in my opinion, it's one thing to tell me that you went after guys like a Matthew Stafford and a Russell Wilson, and you ended up having to settle for a Carson Wentz. Ron Rivera is so arrogant to the point that what Dre said, it could possibly be true. He's not looking at him as being a bridge, because in my opinion, if you're looking at a bridge quarterback, you're not paying them $28 million and you're trading assets for them. Like, there's no way that you're doing that. A bridge quarterback, like I had said a couple episodes ago, is like a Tyrod Taylor, a Jameson Williams,
Trubisky,
or even Trubisky. And
and
Trubisky didn't even go for the dollar amount that I thought he would, just because of being on the open market. He pretty much signed a similar deal to Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? So if you're really going after the bridge guy, those are the guys that you should have brought in here, and you could still be at the same level. Wentz doesn't put them over the edge. But I mean, I guess if you want to take the gamble, you want to be that comfortable to tie your name to Wentz. If it were me, I wouldn't have done that shit. But I don't really know where Carson Wentz sits amongst 32 quarterbacks in the league. Of course, he's better than Taylor Heineke, as he should be. It's a number 2 overall pick versus an undrafted guy who was sitting on the couch, probably playing Madden.
I would have paid that $15 million for Jameis. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. So
about Mitchell Trubisky and his contract, I would have overpaid for Jameis and just took away that $20 million.
And people hate on Winston, but he's truly a guy that connects well in the locker room. Yeah, he had a season where he threw 30.
Bro, the man was dancing on one leg the same game he tore his ACL, bro, in the locker room, bro. Turn it up with the cane, bro. Turn it up.
People love him. Yeah, he threw 30 interceptions, but he also threw 30 touchdowns for 5,000 plus yards.
33.
Like,
you gotta be specific.
Oh yeah, 30.
He
33. Okay, 33 touchdowns. He still had a 30 for 30 season, pretty much. Like, at the end of the day, it just doesn't click for me. And I'm curious to see what happens in this press conference, because Dre, I'm really leaning to the fact that I think Ron them think that Carson Wentz is a long-term answer for them at this position.
They do. That's what I'm telling you.
Which is asinine. Like,
okay.
But AJ, that's the gamble they're taking. I was just gonna say that's the gamble they're taking. And kind of to get back to the original point on JD McKissic, I mean, I know a lot of fans have kind of been down about the whole JD McKissic to Buffalo. I love JD McKissic. I think he was a great player here. I mean, I think he was more value here than he probably would have been a lot of places in the NFL. Mm-hmm. He played here where he was a security blanket for quarterbacks like Alex Smith. All right, let's go back to Alex Smith. Alex Smith, at one point, after his leg gave out, Alex Smith couldn't throw the ball past 10 yards. That's where J.D. McKissic comes in, and he becomes your best target. Taylor Heineke has no strong arm. He's going to look for that check down. J.D. McKissic played in Detroit before he got here. He played with Matt Stafford, a guy who's known for, going downfield. That's why the Rams got him, yada, yada, yada. Matt Stafford, Carson Wentz, even if he's not on Matt Stafford's level, Josh Allen, all of those guys are kind of similar quarterbacks, and they look downfield. J.D. McKissic is not going to have the value with a Carson Wentz that he had with a Taylor Heineke and an Alex Smith on one leg. He was the security blanket for those quarterbacks here, and he elevated his status. In Detroit, he was expendable. I don't know how many Detroit Lions fans there are, but I'm sure nobody was crying that J.D. McKissic was entering free agency. When we got him, we turned him into Larry Centers. Larry Centers was one of the best catching. He was a fullback at the time. Now, Larry Centers was beyond his years. But as a fullback, he was a guy who caught a lot of passes out of the backfield. He was a quarterback's best friend, a check down quarterback's best friend. And that's what J.D. McKissic was here at his time of Washington. I love J.D. McKissic. I would have loved for him to stay. But obviously, I think his value would have plummeted. I think his value would have plummeted with Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz is not a check down quarterback. That's been one of his knocks. in Indianapolis and Philadelphia is that he is a kind of a home run hitter as a quarterback. He looks for the deep ball. He looks for the intermediate passes, but he's not a check down guy. So J.D. McKissick's value will plummet here. So I don't know if you pay the fee that Buffalo just paid for J.D. McKissick, and J.D. McKissick probably is going to go back to being Detroit J.D. McKissick in Buffalo versus Washington McKissick in Buffalo with Josh Allen.
So while I will say I agree that the overreactions are real, I did put up a mention on JD just in terms of what we're losing, because I think the part of the conversation is people assuming that you'll just automatically find JD McKissick later, like another JD McKissick. I think the issue is that JD was such a do-it-all guy. He was the third down guy. He was a third down specialist. He was your pass catcher, your pass blocker, pass protection, and he also knew how he had vision and he had acceleration, a change of pace that Antonio Gibson did not have. And I think that's kind of the part that we don't, in terms of the fan base, aren't taking into account when you talk about J.D. McKissick. Sure, you can move on from him. That's perfectly fine. But can you move on from him and say, without a shadow of a doubt, we'll just get another guy to move in and take his spot? I wouldn't say so. There was a reason. There was, like, last year, Jared Patterson was taking pass protection reps in training camp or some shit like that, or maybe even in preseason too, and there was notating that he was struggling in pass pro. Like, it's something as simple as pass protection where you're all of a sudden realizing that you don't have a back who can really hold up outside of the Chris Thompson and obviously J.D. McKissick. So I think those are just different things. And on top of that, J.D. was a playmaker. Like, he made plays for the offense. So I think that was also an added value. So can you do everything that I just listed and on top of that be a viable playmaker for your offense? And I think that's what the part that we're missing or losing when we don't even put in an offer for J.D. McKissick. And I think that Carson Wentz, while he isn't a check down quarterback, I agree, he does throw to the running backs within the scheme of an offense. If there's a play call designed for a running back in a swing or a screen, that's how Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines accumulated all their catches. Nyheim Hines is lining up as a receiver sometimes in tight splits, and then you have Jonathan Taylor getting halfback screens and swings. Like, that's how they're getting their catches. And I think that's one of the ways that you could have utilized J.D. McKissick. But at the end, I understand them letting him go. I understand J.D. wanting to move on. But yes, I feel like my whole point is just because you move on from somebody, don't think it's just completely easy to replace everything that JD did.
And just to add on to Maul, like what he was saying, JD was your number 2 wide receiver statistically on the team.
Why is that? Why
bad,
is that?
But I'm about to say that's bad, but I agree.
It's because of your boy Scott Turner, who just got his extension.
No, it's not all Scott Turner, AJ. You had a AJ, you hated Taylor Heineke. Now, somehow, AJ called me Taylor Heineke's dad. AJ is becoming Taylor. He's becoming Taylor Heineke's dad. No,
I'm not.
He's been worried about Taylor Heineke's feelings, and now he's taking Taylor Heineke's blame and placing it on Scott Turner.
What Taylor too, man? How does he?
Taylor has no arm, AJ. Where's he gonna throw the ball to? Where's he gonna throw the ball?
I understand that, right? Like, the reason why I spoke up for Taylor Heineke is because you brought in a quarterback that's injury prone. So there's a reason why that 70% was included in that deal to go up to a second. Because motherfuckers not really sure that he's going to last all season. With Taylor Heineke and J.D. McKissick's relationship, I think it was more so down to the game plan. Like, that was the scheme. Like, they were trying to force the ball to the flat so bad that teams just knew it was happening. Like, anytime
80 catches with Alex Smith and Dwayne Haskins. 80 catches.
Hey, man, at the end of the day, Maul already gave out the whole scope of everything that McKissick brought to the table. I just feel like you possibly could get someone to fill in that role, but there's no guarantee. Whereas all you had to do was pay this man $3.5 for 2 years each. Like, come on,
2 years,
like,
$7 million contract for those who don't know.
Like, bro, that's nothing. That's nothing.
Look at James White's question. James White's contract was cheaper than J.D. McKissick. He's similar back, very similar back.
I got a question for y'all. I think that this is Ron Rivera's thought process, potentially. And I know a lot of fans aren't gonna like it. Once again, I think our fans are overreactors to a lot of stuff. Do you think that part of J.D. McKissick being gone is because they're banking on Curtis Samuel coming back and potentially being in that role
That's a
as
good
well
question.
as being a number two receiver?
That's a good
Man,
question.
if you paid that man that much money to be your third down running back, pretty much. And I get what you're saying, right? They probably do plan the game plan him in that role a little bit more, but we didn't see that motherfucker play all year for real. Like, and you're paying him number two money, and you don't have a number two. So unless you're playing at 11th overall, is to go get me a big time wide receiver. I know some people in here like Olave or Garrett Wilson. Me, I don't care about the torn ACL. I think ACL is a completely different injury than it used to be back in the day. I mean, we just seen the Cowboys give out big money to Michael Gallup, who has a torn ACL, but Jameson Williams out of Alabama is the best wide receiver in the class, and he changes everything vertically. Like, yeah, I mean, dude play like Tyreek Hill, low key. Like, so I mean, I really don't know the plan. Nobody knows the plan. We all just kind of just
No, I
based on
I
what we
get it.
see.
Drake mentioned it. I agree. The plan is Carson Wentz. I mean, it is what it is.
It is, bro.
Whether or not it's a good plan or not, we kind of have our opinions on that. But at this point, I think we know what the plan is. They gave up all that money. They restricted themselves early on in free agency because we know they can restructure things and move money around. But they restricted themselves early on in free agency. Gave up some draft picks for Carson Wentz. The plan is Carson Wentz, and if that plan don't work, then that is if the plan literally determines, like, after the season is over, determines that it didn't work, then we have much more serious conversations that may even warrant goddamn emergency streams from Trapper Dive, which we don't fucking do. So that, I think that's kind of where we are with the plan. Fellas, look, this has been great, man, and you know we can do this shit all day, man, but I want everybody to, do what they got to do with their crib. I got to eat. I'm hungry, man. I ain't eat all day. But listen, for everybody that's watching, man, I appreciate everybody that stayed. You said what?
Not past your window.
Intermittent fasting. No more doing that intermittent fasting.
Look, I got 8 more minutes, bro. But at this point, I'm about to pass the window, bro. It's whatever, dog. Let me go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and deal with that, and it be what it is. But I appreciate everybody that stayed in the whole time, man. Y'all been great. Just checking out everything. And if you're new, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you aren't, make sure you hit that like button, all that good stuff. If you haven't, Twitch, same thing. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't, all that good stuff. We got a special episode that we're recording in a couple days. We'll put that out, when it's done. It won't be live streamed, but good content is good conversation, as always, with a guy that we all know, especially within the DC area. So looking forward to that. For me, I'm on tomorrow with the All 32 Side of Trap or Die podcast. Live stream wise, the fellas will be back next Tuesday for the Commander Talk, all that good stuff. So with that being said, y'all be safe. Enjoy y'all evening, y'all night, all that good stuff. Peace.
But